The beautiful poem that Heather read from the book of Isaiah points to one of the fundamental dynamics of the spiritual life. As humans, as mortals, our lives are finite. We will all one day die, and even before that, we face limitations. There are things we cannot do, things we don't understand, times when we grow weary in mind, body, or soul. Yet at one and the same time, we are connected to God, who is bigger and deeper than all of that. A God whose ways we will never fully understand, but who can give strength to the weary and power to the powerless. As I was thinking about this poem this week, I was also reading a book by an Ojibwe author, Richard Wagamese, entitled For Joshua. The book is a memoir of sorts, written for his younger son, Joshua, to introduce him to some of the key aspects of Ojibwe tradition, as well as to explain some of the key moments on his own faith journey. At one point in the story, Wagamese talks about the unity pipe, sometimes mistakenly, in his opinion, called a peace pipe. His mentor, John, is a pipe carrier, and one day as they are packing up to go on a journey together, John shares with him this teaching about the pipe. Every pipe, he explains, is made up of two pieces: a stone bowl made from a special kind of rock called pipestone, and a wooden stem. John describes the meaning of each part thus. The bowl represents spirituality, or living from the heart. When you live from the heart, you see the Creator in everything and everybody. When you live from the heart, you feel truth before you understand truth. The bowl and the stone it's made of reminds us that spirituality and the faith that comes from it lasts forever. It's eternal, like the rocks, the mountains, the backbone of Mother Earth. Faith means choosing to believe, and the bowl asks us to choose to believe in creation and its teaching. The stem represents life, all things that grow. Sometimes a pipe has an animal skin wrapped around the stem, or feathers or grasses. They serve to remind us that different lives around us, they serve to remind us of the different lives around us, and that we are all the same. Unlike the stone of the bowl, the wooden stem is fragile. It can be chipped or broken. It might rot or decay. And it reminds us that life is fragile. It reminds us that life will eventually end. This is where the most vital teaching is. See how each part of the pipe is wrapped separately from the other? Well, they're kept apart until songs are sung and prayers are offered for each of them. The reason is that both spirituality and life need to be honored. They need to be recognized for the power they each carry, separately. The prayers offered for the bowl and the stem are very old because they have been the foundation of our way for a long time. When the prayers are finished, the elder or pipe carrier unwraps each element. They are smudged with sweetgrass, tobacco, and sage, so they are clean, pure, and free from anything that might block their ability to carry prayers and petitions. Then they are joined. And this is the reason why a pipe ceremony is so solemn. The moment when the bowl and stem are joined, when unity is achieved, is the most powerful teaching of our people. That joining of life to spirituality is the most sacred joining. For most of us gathered here today, the Ojibwe tradition is not our tradition. We do not have sacred pipes. We can and should appreciate the spiritual traditions of others, but without invitation and much instruction, it is not appropriate to claim them as our own. So I don't pretend to have a deep understanding of what the unity pipe means to those whose tradition it is. Nevertheless, I found Wagamese's description of the pipe's meaning left me thinking differently about this poem from our own tradition, from the prophet Isaiah. We have God, who is eternal, like the rocks or the mountains, a God who does not break, who endures forever, a God who never gets tired, who can run a marathon without breaking a sweat, a God who can raise us up to soar through the skies like eagles. And we have us, human beings who grow weary, who need rest, who make mistakes, whose lives are like the grasshoppers in the field, here today and gone tomorrow. And what connects the two in a meaning-filled way is our own traditions. The songs of faith we sing, the prayers we make, the practice of Sabbath keeping, the rituals we have for different moments on the life journey, baptisms, confirmations, weddings, funerals, the times we break bread around God's table, the seasons of the church year and their invitation to walk through the different stories and themes of our faith, the Bible and our accumulated tradition with its treasure trove of stories. The traditions of our faith provide a time-honored way for us to connect our mortal, limited, fragile, yet beautiful lives to God, who is bigger than we are, whose resources can give us strength when our own is faltering, whose very nature is eternal. Like the Ojibwe traditions, which connect the stem to the pipe in a sacred union, the purpose of our religious practice is to connect and reconnect our lives to the living God, so that we can renew our strength, not just once, but again and again and again, as we get blown about by the stresses of the world, or as our mind gets all shaken up with the thoughts inside it. I do not believe that our traditions are the only way to do that, or even necessarily the best way. I believe that traditional Indigenous teaching offers a way to engage the divine, as do the traditions of our Muslim brothers and sisters, our Jewish sisters and brothers, and people of other faiths and traditions as well. Nevertheless, I do believe that our traditions offer a way to connect with God that our ancestors have found helpful. We don't have to invent it all by ourselves. We probably couldn't invent it all by ourselves even if we wanted to. It has taken generations of trial and error to build up a rich history of faith. We can and should add to that tradition of faith and reshape it for a new time and new circumstances, but we shouldn't try to start from scratch. It would take more than a lifetime to build something workable on our own. Which brings me to what I see as the two major stumbling blocks that often disconnect us from renewing power of God in our time. The first is that we dabble a little bit here and a little bit there in many different faith traditions without going deeply into any of them. In a world with many faiths and practices and enough communication that we know a lot about them, it is wonderful to learn something about multiple religious traditions and how other people practice their faith. Such learning can enrich one's own faith and practice. And I can also honor that sometimes people feel called to convert from the faith tradition they were born into a different one for a variety of reasons. What I think is unfortunate is when we learn just a little tiny bit about a lot of faiths and don't actually go deeply into any of them. I've probably shared with you before the image of the spiritual journey as being like a wheel. God is at the center of that wheel, the still point around which everything turns, and there are many different spokes that you can follow towards that still point. And as you get closer to the center, you discover that the paths are actually remarkably close to one another. But you will never get close to the center by journeying around the rim. If you pick a story here and a practice of faith there and don't stay with any of them long enough for them to really affect you, you won't actually get very close to God. You'll just go around and round on the outside of the wheel. The second stumbling block is that we don't make time to practice any faith tradition regularly. There is a reason we talk about practicing our faith. Faith is not something you arrive at. It is something you do again and again. It's more like practicing piano than learning your multiplication tables. It requires practice. Even if you were a world-famous pianist, if you stopped practicing, after a little while you would not play piano as well as you did before. You have to keep practicing to keep your skill level up. And even if you are not very adept when you start practicing, you will get better with repetition. Except in this case, what we are practicing is not piano, but connecting with God, the source of life who can renew our strength and our vision. In today's world, it can be too easy to get too busy or too distracted or too cynical to remember that we cannot renew our own strength all the time. We don't know everything, and in fact, we will never know everything, and we are indeed mortal. So we need to connect our strength to a source of strength that is deeper than our own, a source of knowledge and wisdom that is greater than our own understanding, and a fullness of life that goes beyond our own mortality. So this week, make time, especially if you are feeling discouraged or weary or vulnerable, to connect with God. Offer a word of prayer, read a story from the Bible, come to Bible study on Fridays at 10:15 at Queen's Court if that can fit your schedule. Spend some time quietly sitting in the presence of God. Put Sunday worship in your calendar on your phone as a recurring event so that you have to decide not to come rather than deciding to come. Sing a song of faith, either alone or I am sure that the choir would welcome you to join them on Thursday evening. Spend a little time talking to someone that you trust about your faith journey. It doesn't have to be an onerous thing. It doesn't have to take a lot of time, but it can make a big difference in our lives. For as the prophet Isaiah reminds us, those who wait for God find a renewed power. They soar on eagle's wings. They run and don't get weary. They walk and never tire. Thanks be to God. Amen.